I love when movies or television series present us with interesting moral debates, especially when people could reasonably find themselves on either side of said debate. And perhaps the most interesting film moral quandary in recent memory took place in Captain America's Civil War. I mean, who was in the right, Tony or Steve? At the time of Civil War's release, the MCU fanbase was extremely divided on that question, and even all these years later, I still think a lot of people are at odds. Now, in all transparency, I was an Iron Man fanboy back in 2016. He was and still is my favorite MCU character of all time. So I was Team Tony all those years ago, but now that I've grown and matured a bit, I want to revisit this conflict between the two pillars of the MCU and truly get to the bottom of which side is more morally correct. The biggest reason I think this is such a hot button argument is because both sides have merit to them. From a purely theoretical perspective, the Avengers needing some level of supervision and to be held accountable for the damage they cause makes a lot of sense. And if you were to place the Avengers into our real world, something like the Sokovia Accords would absolutely be deemed as necessary. How could you possibly expect people to just blindly trust superpowered individuals who they don't know? If you're a normal citizen, just giving these random people free rein to do whatever they want in their attempts to protect us is not something you'd be inclined to do. However, when you put this into the inverse perspective of the MCU, not wanting government supervision is wildly understandable. For starters, Secretary Ross is the one spearheading the Accords, and Ross is not exactly trustworthy. He is a bit of a questionable moral compass, as can be seen in The Incredible Hulk and even the recent Captain America Brave New World. Also in Steve's mind, the last time their team had government intervention was back in the first Avengers film, and that's when the government made the decision to nuke New York in order to kill the invading alien army, which would have led to far more collateral damage than anything the Avengers had done in the city. And this forced Tony to almost kill himself to get the nuke out of New York. Also, the other organization that Cap has been working with, in S.H.I.E.L.D., was itself corrupt from the start, as half the organization was Hydra in hiding. All this to say that when Steve asserts that the safest hands are still their own, he has got a really solid point. I mean, who's more likely to become corrupted? Captain America, or the established governing bodies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And since both stances of this debate have an understandable foundation upon first glance, I think it's easy to see why Tony and Steve ultimately came to blows and failed to reach common ground. But as much as it pains me as the Tony Stark fanboy that I am, upon further examination, I do think Captain America is far more in the right. Primarily because context matters, and not only are the governing bodies of the MCU questionable at best, but when you really think about the destruction caused in Sokovia, it's kind of all Tony's fault. His ambition and the reason behind him trying to create Ultron were pure. He saw the forces that were going to try to take over the planet firsthand, and he knew we needed something to protect us. But making Ultron without discussing it with his team first and talking through the potential drawbacks of an AI program like Ultron was objectively a bad move. So when Tony is trying to guilt trip the team with all the deaths that they caused in Sokovia, in reality it's primarily the deaths that he caused. So in a way, he's projecting his inner guilt onto the entire team. If Tony hadn't made Ultron in the first place, then they might not be in this position, and he might very well feel different about the Accords matter. And he never really addresses or apologizes for his actions in causing all of that destruction. In general, should the Avengers be a little more open with the governing bodies of the world when it comes to what they're doing and how they're doing it? Yeah, they probably should. Should they also be more careful about the collateral damage that their battles cause? Yes, they absolutely should. But I do think it's ironic that Wanda has to be put under house arrest for her role in the Lagos fiasco, while Tony receives no punishment for his much larger role in what happened in Sokovia, a situation that resulted in a lot more people dead than Lagos. So if I'm being honest, Tony is being a bit of a hypocrite in Civil War with how he approaches the Accords. He is perfectly fine with unrestricted government intervention as long as punishment or blame isn't directly placed upon himself. And even at the end of the film, Tony himself breaks the Sokovia Accords that he signed. He flies to Siberia without receiving permission from the government first, so that he can help Cap and Bucky. I mean, he had literally just visited a supermax prison where all of Captain America's allies were locked up simply because they broke the Accords. So by Tony then turning around and immediately breaking the Accords himself, it kinda shows that he thinks he's above the rules, or that he came to the understanding that he was on the wrong side. Now, to be fair to Iron Man, I do think that Steve, while being on the morally correct side of the Sokovia Accords debate, is also kind of a bad friend to Tony. And this primarily comes down to Cap's decision to not tell Tony about the Winter Soldier killing his parents. He should have been honest with his friend as soon as he found out. In reality, he was not sparing Tony by not telling him, and was rather sparing himself from the pain of having to tell his friend the truth. It was simply easier to hold on to the secret. But being a bad friend doesn't mean that your stance is wrong. Even with Iron Man attempting to kill Bucky, while his frustration and anger are understandable given what Bucky did, Tony was fully aware that the Winter Soldier did not kill his parents under his own free will. He was brainwashed and forced to kill them. So even in his rage, Tony is still not on the quote-unquote right side of things. He is acting pretty much purely out of a desire for vengeance and revenge. In all honesty, I have to admit that growing up is realizing that Captain America was right, as much as it hurts me to say it. Well, if you made it this far, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Civil War debate. Are you still Team Iron Man or are you Team Cap? I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please feel free to drop a like and subscribe for more Screen Stories content. Thank you for watching, and until next time, peace.